Welcome to Creative Bites, your go-to podcast for an inspiring mix of creativity, entrepreneurship, communications, and much more. I'm your host, Ivona Fluda, and in each episode, we will bring you compelling stories from the movers and shakers across various industries. We will discover how ideas evolve, how communication shapes our world, and how the entrepreneurial spirit drives progress. Whether you're looking for inspiration, innovation, or just a good story, you will find it here. So tune in, join the conversation, and explore the many facets of creativity with us. The following conversation is with Reso Factor. Reso is a leading expert in CTP Energy Science, expanding on Nikola Tesla's work. He advances non-physical energy concepts and technologies, aiming to propel humanity into a new era of interstellar exploration. As the head of CTP Energy, Reso is dedicated to fulfilling Tesla's vision and leading the industrial revolution. Reso, it's such a great privilege to have you with me here today. I know that you have been involved in so many fantastic and very interesting scientific discoveries and explorations. But before we jump into them, I'm very curious to learn what inspired you to follow in the footsteps of Nikola Tesla.
Okay, that's a very good question. Let's see, how should I say this? Around 2004, 2005, okay, I was networking online at the time, before LinkedIn and before Academy and a lot of the other typical, business social networking sites. There was a business networking site called RYZE Business Networks. And there, I was networking one day. I was temporarily living in New Mexico for about a year. And while I was networking online, I ran into a representative of this guy. Her name was Martha, and she said, "Hey, we cross paths here on Reeves. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're doing." And this guy I know, and basically she introduced who I will refer to as Drazen as the next successor to Nikola Tesla. Okay, now obviously, growing up as a boy, most people in Western society have done any, science, history, or engineering studies or anything relatable know the name that Nikola Tesla conveys relative to even today's society. I mean, he shaped and built the second industrial revolution. Mm-hmm. For an all part, him and Edison, you could say, really, I would say it was more Tesla's genius that really shaped the electrical age than Edison's by far. Okay, so anyway, so she introduces me, and the story goes like your average business thing. You go through your initial emails and correspondences to the point where you're in some type of setting either like this in a face-to-face meet, which they didn't have, Zoom, 2004, 2005, and related chat protocol web services like we have today. But back then, so I eventually was introduced to this guy, and I was skeptical at first. Someone says, "Oh, you're some next Tesla," and go, but when I started speaking to my late mentor, he is actually deceased now. He passed in 2019 at the age of 63. Okay. But when I first was introduced and started corresponding with my late mentor, like all of those doubts were removed really, really early on, that this guy is really, who he said he was. And then many people first hearing about, CTP, or what we refer to as the CTP sciences, it's an entire field of sciences. It kind of like as a cluster. It's not just going to be used for one area of innovation or one vertical or one market or industry in the future. It's an entire new science. It's as comprehensive as quantum physics or even, even string theory. This would be the ultimate theory of everything, what we call CTP. And so anyway, so I started to get to know him, and he was working on actually 3 different startups at the time. I eventually got to the point where I was in far enough working with him that we wanted to, I moved up to Florida to work with him at the time. We tried getting traction for some other startups that never really seemed to, catch on at the time. And then eventually, there were some circumstances, and I had to basically go through, like, there's a whole sequence of events involved where basically he eventually found himself on the streets of Orlando and homeless. And that basically what happened with Drazen, many people will look up his history, probably after this video. But basically, what happened was in Tesla's final years, Tesla basically became, kind of destitute, living off of, in the New York hotel. Drazen never realized his vision of CTP during his time here. Okay, so in December of 2021, I found out that he had passed, 1 or 2 years before the fact, and then in late December of 21, I was faced with a choice whether or not I'm going to let his name and his science die in obscurity, or whether or not I would have the gall, to take up CTP for a second time under my directorship and present it to the world, this time for the promise that this science can offer humankind into our future. And that's basically where, we find ourselves today, with me continuing Drazen's work with what we call CTP Energy Science, or the CTP sciences. And for people coming in or just hearing about this, many people, what is this CTP you're talking about, Reso? Okay.
Wait a second, before we jump into that, because that's of course very curious, just one comment on this. What we are working on basically is the theory of everything, what also Stephen Hawking tried to work on, or worked on for a very long time, right? So basically,
right.
What you are bringing together is kind of what you're designing or creating is a new science that will allow us to understand the theory of everything.
Yes, but it's not, that's that would be a small part of it, because in addition to that, okay, there are actually what we can consider practical, commercial, and industrial applications for the science as well. It's not just something that, for the past 20 years, something like string theory has kind of, been fluttering in the background, really hasn't demonstrated any value to society. It's just a theory. Okay, this is not just a theoretical presumptions or assumptions that the science will offer humanity. We're talking practical innovations that we can utilize over the next 10 years, and into realizing this as actually having real value for society.
That's fantastic, because it also means that basically you're translating also the theoretical parts of the science into something tangible for the society, in the industry in general. That's fantastic. But before we'll dive deeper into that, I would love to learn a little bit more about the basic principles of what we are working on.
Okay. Well, let's see. Let's do the tie-in with Tesla, so we can make sense of the science, because as a new science, many people will be kind of like, well, what is this? Okay, so Nikola Tesla's innovations primarily dealt with, like, rotating magnet fields, polyphase electromagnetism, and things dealing with magnetism. Okay, which is one of the four fundamental forces of reality. So we've defined our, even quantum physics. This is where the tie-in occurs. Okay, so with today's sciences and physics, over the past, ever since 300 400 years, since electricity and magnetism, and then they were united, and then we go into the atomic age with the strong and the weak nuclear force, and from there, we go into quantum physics. What my late mentor Drazen discovered is that behind all of these different physical forces, we would call the P energy, okay, there are two additional non-physical fundamental forces that are like at the ultimate baseline of reality. Okay, so we call that the non-physical C energy and the T energy. And together, what we call these CTP mother forces, those forces, six fundamental forces combined together, ultimately make up what we call the unified field theory, as defined by what we refer to as the CTP energy cycle. Okay. So this science is an evolutionary and divergent fork of where Nikola Tesla's research eventually would have led him if Nikola Tesla lived long enough to make these discoveries that my late mentor would make, about 100 years later. Okay. So basically, if we look at electricity as what powers the world we live in today by the light, and the computer screens, but basically the non-physical conscience or C energy would be what we could define as the ultimate energy behind everything. That includes all of the physical forces and even what we would consider, what most people try to ascribe to metaphysics or the spiritual realm. The non-physical C energy would ultimately be that ultimate force.
This is fascinating. And here a question, I can imagine that you also have faced different challenges related to that, related specifically to convincing the scientific community about the validity of what you are working on. How has it been for you so far?
Well, let's put it like this. We tried taking out this science initially in 2006-ish on social media at the time, and reception was not that great. Okay, and uh, I've been networking on LinkedIn for about 2 years now, or just over 2 years and 4 months, and I've interacted. It's been a curious journey, I will say. I've networked with some really powerful people in industry and science, and I've had, let's just say, a few billion offers in big funding interest to date that ultimately I had to reject because I didn't feel were really aligned to what our objections and our mission are. Okay. As far as the rest of the scientific community, this has been a curious journey, to say the least, because most people in today's world, whether you're coming from a spiritual background or a scientific background, most people like intuitively have a sense that there is some other force or energy that our physical sciences haven't quite identified yet. But many of them, or especially in today's academic and scientific world, there's a lot of internal censoring going on because many people are afraid to actually like quite go there and cross that other. There's a fine line, and once you cross that line, then you start coming against like your skeptics, your scrutiny, your rejections. There are people that have been involved in this industry. Well, one gentleman I'll refer to as Richard Gordon. Okay, he's on my Twitter list. Please, if any skeptics want to challenge Richard Gordon, by all means, find Richard Gordon. He is involved with what he calls quantum touch healing. Uh, but he does, Richard. The difference between Richard and I is that I have a more thorough understanding of where CTP applies here than maybe other people that have been involved in holistic sciences have for the past 20 years, because uh, they're let's put it like this: all holistic healing, okay, like it doesn't matter, if it's Reiki, Shiatsu, Qigong, whatever modality of different, spiritual healing practices that have been, to my satisfaction, and thousands of others, the world over for the past 20 years. This science defines exactly how things like spontaneous healing or other, unexplainable healing that, science, physical sciences today still get really stuck. Well, well, that's a miracle, but they don't understand the CTP processes of how like that actually occurred. Okay, so there's more than enough demonstrable evidence out there. The main resistance comes in the fact that, one, this is a new science, it's using new lexicon and definitions, and just from the onset of that, well, hey, these are new scientific terms that are exclusive to us as a private science, and my job isn't necessarily to win over all of academia now. Okay, my purpose primarily is to find investment capital and support for us early on now, so we can create the science foundation and start doing all the initial research that I can drive independently without having to worry about being filtered through your conventional, the paradigm and the way things are run to date in academia and other circles. Like, we can do this research independently on our own without needing, review boards and all the. Look at there's a physicist named Sabine Hassenfelder, I believe her name is. She you go to her YouTube channel. She can tell you all of the different issues that she's had dealing with physicists and particle physics, and that whole background. So it's not, the burden of proof isn't just all on me in this. There's a whole new scientific paradigm we're talking about, and it's natural that resistance, rejection, skepticism, and everything that we're proposing would be like just summarily dismissed by many people from the get-go. But on the flip side of that, there are hundreds of thousands of people that are really waiting for like the next big thing to come forward and answer the other questions that physical sciences are kind of stuck on in today's terms. Things like dark energy, dark matter, consciousness, what happens, when we die, human mortality, anti-aging, what's the truth about our spirituality, what's the truth about UFOs and other topics that many consider to be fringe topics, but these are actually mainstream topics in today's world. It's just that the kind of like the entrenched paradigm today will just not really have any interest in going anywhere near these topics because of the certain controversies or the larger reality that they bring for us that we ultimately are going to have to face at some point in our lifetime. So it's a whole, it's been an interesting ride, to say the least.
I can imagine. You mentioned something very interesting. You mentioned that the theories you're working on and the implementations of them are very much connected to alternative healing or holistic healing. You mentioned Reiki, different energy healing modalities, right? Have you
Yes.
experienced that yourself? And did this science help you to explain the physicalities, the components of that?
Okay. Yes. Actually, this is actually if I could share a story that actually happened to
Sure.
me before I actually found Drazen and learned about this science. I was already working with what we call the CTP sci principles, probably at least 10 to 15 years before encountering Drazen or CTP. Okay. In my early 20s, I had met a group of friends that were interested in these topics, like chi, and you have your different Eastern healing practices, like Reiki. Well, that's more kind of, we called Japan. Okay, but things like also tied in with things like Taoism and chi, and then you start going to more Western modalities. You learn things about like energy healing or healing hands, or the whole contemporary holistic industry that's out there. I don't need to scientifically validate that it works. Okay, but so the quick and short of it was, I was at a seminar in Houston, uh, let's say for one weekend, and one Saturday, a woman named Gina was sitting, let's say she was right here, okay, adjacent to me, and she had a headache, and so I go, okay, well, let me work on it, because I've done that stuff before. And so basically, I just turned to her, and and I just focused along where her cranial area was, and I just basically did the thing, and felt what they call the field, or the bioelectric field, and did all the things. And basically the same way that anyone could pluck a pebble from a pool of water, and take a pebble out of a pool of water with their hand, and take it out the pond, bottom of the pond. I basically just, let me see, for camera sakes, basically I just, went to her, did the thing, and plucked the headache out of her head, where the muscle tension and all the whatever blood vessel tension or whatever was going in it. And then basically I pulled her headache out of her head like one would pluck a pebble out of the bottom of a pond. I learned it years before. Okay, so I actually have experience with holistic healing personally, and have seen it work in multiple occasions. A family member for a long time, he had he is a radiologist, and he had a long standing problem with like a lower lumbar issue. Okay. And, and I'd perform, this is all like, off the record and, just in my own private, like in my living room kind of situation, and energy healing is free, as far as, I wasn't a paid, consultant. Basically, I did the work. I know how it works. And, his lumbar problems went away. And, Richard Gordon, that I've referred to before, does this all the time. And I mean, that this is it's what it is.
That's fascinating, and I feel like it's a what you do with your scientific work is basically you're explaining to people how and why these things are working, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And the reason, a lot of people that get into CTP want to know, okay, well, if you're talking about a science that exists outside of what we know conventional physics to be, where is the C energy and T energy in relation to our physical world and quantum physics? Like, where are those actual energies or forces? Okay. Well, as I said, so we have our physical reality would be like here on the top layer, and the C layer, the non-physical C layer, exists really below what we could even consider the quantum threshold. It's below the Planck length. Okay, it's non-physical, but as far as where it relates to the atom, the C energy would basically be all the empty space. When you look at an atom, you've got the proton and the neutron, okay, that make up the nucleus of the atom, and then you got your electrons doing their outer orbits, around the atomic nuclei. But the C energy is basically like it's all that empty space, and where the T energy comes in, the T energy is ultimately like a non-physical C domain relational information code, okay, that's like also attached to each atom, and it's the T energy coding that essentially also tells the electrons, like in the outer orbiting shell, like you belong to this atom and this atom only. So
Mhm.
and that's the T energy that tells the electrons basically you cannot orbit further out. I mean, yes, when you talk about things like chemistry, different shells and the atoms will, like, tie in together for different chemicals or like molecules to exist, but ultimately the T energy is what individuates the atomic forces before we can start even thinking about things like atomic physics or quantum realm. It exists on the non-physical side of what we refer to as the CTP energy cycle. And then T energy basically comes in and narrows the frequencies of the C patterns that the C energy units are generating, and then they like constrict it, and then that is ultimately how an atom is actually created. That's the big mystery. A lot of people believe that it's God or an outside entity that created the atoms in our universe, but really it's these non-physical C energy units or groups of C energy units that are thinking of being a specific type of atom or matter. And then the T energy basically narrows those thought patterns into a vibration that then we can identify or measure in some type of quanta or atomic property here on what we would call the physical side of these, the way the CTP forces actually are totally rendering our reality into existence. So that is really the way what we call the CTP reality simulation model works. So we live, a lot of people that are, you could go and Google this or anywhere on the internet today, they keep talking about like, are we living in a simulation? Okay.
Yes.
Not really. Not really. We live in a coded reality, yes. Okay. It's a CTP coded reality, but ultimately it's these CTP processes that kind of act like a rendering engine. Okay. And then these total, like from C and then T codes it, and then there you have your end result of the physical reality that we observe and we're like it's experiencing. And the way it works is that like an entire dedicated group and set of what we call the T energy units, a uniform group of T energy units are responsible for coding what we would consider like this physical universe only. And so it's like a range of T energy frequencies that define this universe, and we have a hardwired set of T energy that codes this range only. And then in other physical realities, there's like basically the way we could describe the multiverse is like a C domain stack, but it's more like reality bandwidths than like different bubbles of universes. Like you've got a universe over here or universe over here. It's more like a range. It's more like a reality
Mm-hmm.
bandwidth. Okay, and
Yeah.
each dedicated group of T energy units only codes one reality. And part of what we're looking for with dark matter is you have different physical realities in other C ranges, and then you have different T energies that are coding those other realities, but ultimately the gravity bleed through different sets of T energy units between different physical ranges is where we're getting all the gravitational discrepancies for what we believe is dark matter. It's not really matter in this reality. It's an adjacent T energy ranges.
Yes, you
That's how,
mentioned something. Yes, very interesting. You mentioned the multiverse realities, right?
yeah, and that's
Which
how it works.
means exactly, which means practically that we can imagine that everything happens at the same time, that past, future, and present are happening at the same time.
Yes, and what we would refer to as okay, so let's just kind of like do a prime. Okay, so if we are spiritual beings, which we are, then just as our physical body is made of atoms and molecules, our spiritual or our sea body must exist, and it
Mm-hmm.
must be made of something, and it is. So it's our spiritual body is made of these units of conscious energy, or the sea energy units. And like I said, the C energy units exist behind all physical matter that in our physical universe, all different types of physical energies. So what we call the physical domain is the physical universe as we see it here. Okay, but in the non-physical domain or the C domain, the most basic building block of C domain would be the C energy units, and the best way to think of them would be like they're like a spiritual atom, but they're not. And since they're like an atom, but not, they have different properties. And ultimately, the C energy units, their thought patterns are ultimately responsible for creating different physical and non-physical realities in different like reality bandwidths.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and understanding that in what we would call the C domain, number one, there is no time, there's no space, and there's no distance as we can perceive. Like in in our physical world, we have things like depth, space, volume, time. However, in the C domain, it really exists outside of what we would call a temporal reality constraint. The C domain really is the C energy is not bound to a quantum state because it's not physical and it's not quantum, and so the C domain, you could say. Uh, Time only exists in physical realities like this one we're experiencing, because what actually creates space-time in an Einsteinian kind of sense, okay, is like when the CTP processes are rendering our reality into existence, this rendering process we experience as time. That this is what is actually making time happen. It's the CTP energy cycle rendering process that creates time, and we observe it and like, okay, so we have a linear moment here, we had what we had 10 minutes ago, but ultimately this aspect time is only something we experience temporally, like in the physical domain. In our spiritual existence, and when where we exist, there really is no time or space or past or present or future. You could say it's all happening simultaneously in a way, but we really have to take our thinking to a higher level to think of a realm of existence where really there is no time or no space at all. And our higher mind, which is really our higher spiritual intelligence, can process this information. The ego mind we use, to for me to move my arm and command my physical body. This mind that we use during our conscious waking state here in this world could never process the level of information that our spiritual existence really entails. And funny enough, this is one of the reasons why when we wake up, when we go to sleep at night, what makes us sleep isn't just a matter of due to metabolic function or like brainwave activity. Our spiritual body, our sea body, really needs to recharge in our natural non-physical habitat. So during our sleep cycle, we detach from our physical body and our higher mind takes over. Okay. And then when we wake up in the next stage of our sleep cycle during the morning, we're basically coming back in and reattaching in. And then we wake up the next morning and say, well, I had this really great idea of something I experienced during the night, and I really can't put my finger on it or like translate, because it seemed clear as everything, up there or whatever, wherever I was, had a great idea, and you wake up the next morning and you forget what that was because spiritually, the way we're built, so to speak, we're kind of like a dual boot Windows and Linux system. Okay, so you have two different operating systems. We have a mind, a higher mind for our C domain existence, and then we have an ego mind for our physical world existence, and each mind governs a different body for like each different domain of existence that we're experiencing. Okay, and the memories of each existence are actually stored on two different partitions of our spiritual body. Okay, and just like on Linux, if you got like, different operating systems, two different operating systems on two different hard drives, those file formats are not necessarily compatible or will read the same file type the same way. And that's basically spiritually really what the truth of our spiritual existence is as well. Okay. I mean, it's a lot to process, I know, but this is basically sums up why we sleep, where we go at night. And so this science will cover all paranormal phenomena or all spiritual phenomena, and will finally define really what all of these different, like the science of what's actually involved behind all of those greater questions that modern science or physics never really could answer because they didn't have the language or the proper understandings to really like package, the whole understanding of the way this larger aspect of our reality works, if that.
Yes, that makes
Okay.
absolutely sense. Just to summarize it, you are saying that what you are doing, you are basically translating spirituality into science. That's one part. The second part is you mentioned time and space are both illusions, which is true, which actually also explains pretty well why remote viewing, telepathy, remote healing are working so well, because when there is no time, no space, we can, of course, direct our energies all around without the physical constraints.
Yes. Yes. But see, the thing is, understanding. Let's see. How should I describe it? The main thing is that physical sciences can't define the way that non-physical like connection happens between between our thoughts and where we're sending our thoughts or targeting certain thoughts. Okay, so the way it works, and many people will want to know, like, do you have any other what's the best way, like, do you have a more scientific way, or can you substantiate this in a scientific way that even quantum physicists or others like lay people could understand? Okay, a good example would be, let's say you're thinking of someone. It doesn't always happen. There are different rules for maybe in other seminars or other interviews later. But basically, you think of someone, and within a couple of minutes, say, hey, oh hey, I was just thinking about you. Hey, it's nice to hear from you. Well, what actually happened? Okay, so the way it works is that our spiritual body or our sea body, when it generates a thought, similar to the way you have on the internet, you have IP packets. Mm-hmm. That send IP datagrams across, the internet. Our spiritual body will actually form like a non-physical sea energy packet and instantly send it out to whomever or whoever we're thinking of, and this C packet, the person you're thinking of, each of our spiritual bodies have what we would call a group C energy frequency. The same way like a website has its own URL or a domain name ascribed to it. Each spiritual body has its own unique GCF. So when you think of someone in particular, your C body automatically forms like a packet, and it goes to that intended recipient. Okay. The problem is in the physical reality, the T energy filters out most of the available background C energy we have. Okay. So whether or not somebody can pick it up or detect it, because it's rather a weak signal uh, relating to how strong that C energy packet is, certain variables have to account whether or not we can pick up on whether or not we're getting that from someone. Certain times, people have said, depending on also things like trauma, can have an amplifying effect on this. You go around the world today, a lot of people, hey, like, I was washing dishes like in my kitchen one day, and then immediately like I had a flash that, my Aunt Betty like passed away. I like, how did I know that when it happened? Okay, well, that is all related to how C energy propagation like occurs across the domain. It's not quantum entanglement based. It's really based on different principles, but basically this is how things like, if when you get that phone call, also this has happened a lot. People get the phone call, oh man, I know that ring, Uncle John just died at the hospital. How do you know that? How do you know that in advance that you're getting that information? It's because the person that's attempting to communicate with you, you're already picking up parts of that information via your C body before that the reality of it like actually like connects in. There's an actual science to spiritually how all of this like works together, and we'll convey. Part of our startup interest will be in, just like in a seminar format, teaching this science in an academic like setting that we will ultimately direct ourselves. There'll be better trainers and better, we'll have other, employees coached in this science. It's a lot to really cover in just one talk. But basically
Absolutely.
this is the science of how that all works.
I totally understand. Just one question about this, because I'm still very curious to learn about any other practical applications for that. What do you envision for the future? Let's say the topic is covered, has a profound scientific anchoring already. Everyone accepts that it exists. Also in the scientific world, how do you envision the practical applications of translating this knowledge into the world?
Okay, well, let's see. For the communications aspects, this is rather practical as well. Let's think just in terms of SETI. Okay, we've been running. SETI was founded. A group of SETI was founded during the '80s, and we've been using radio telescopes now for anywhere from 40 to 60 years, and we've still never really detected what we would consider the real wow signal from an advanced civilization, like not a blip. I mean, how many gigahertz of bandwidths and petabytes or however much data, the SETI at Home project that ran for many years, that eventually shut down. But regardless, we're still running. Arecibo crashed a couple years ago, but regardless, for all the decades that we've been looking, for dark matter, we still really haven't found it. And for all of the decades we've been looking for some type of techno signatures, or what we call, an alien communication signal, we still never found that. That should tell us that our sciences or using their approaches aren't working, because that's not the approaches that other civilizations would use by any. Okay, so this science will actually make first contact before SETI, because we've discovered that the way the problem with radio waves, if you want to communicate with let's say from here to Mars, speed of light in just our solar system, from here to Mars is about 7 minutes. We could not have a internet meet like this, even with, let's say, Elon wants to build a civilization on Mars. We could not have a discussion like this on Mars between you and me in real time on Mars without wait 7 minutes for a send, receive, confirm response to happen. Go into Jupiter space, then we're talking 23 minutes. And so as you start getting further and further spatial distances from your target at speed of light, even via radio waves, you want to communicate. Let's say, there's some civilization, if they live somewhere off of, Betelgeuse or Rigel, or anywhere in the Orion constellation, or even, a mere what we would call 1,500 light years approximately, just to the Orion constellation via radio waves, it would take, approximately 1,500 light years just to say, hey, and then another, 1,500 years, how are you doing? 3,000 years just for a basic hello introduction. Ridiculous, okay? What Drazen discovered is that the way the C energy works is that it propagates instantaneously, like faster than the speed of light. And so it's the basis of understanding this science is how we will ultimately end up communicating with advanced civilizations, regardless of their physical spatial distances, if they're, 2 light years, 20 light years, 200 light years, 2,000 light years, 20,000 light years, 20 million light years, to even 2 billion light years away in another distant galaxy or another star system. The C energy will be able to allow us to communicate instantly with other civilizations, regardless of how far away they are from Earth. The problem is that the rudiments of this science, since we've never been funded, like we still have a lot of preliminary research to figure out how to actually, make all of this work. Okay, but this will actually be the science that allows us to make first contact demonstrably before SETI or any other type of outreach program we're using today. That's one implication. Okay, the other implication of this science is that, for years, people have been wondering about UFOs and how, they travel. Like if it's not wormholes or Abacure drive, how would UFOs be able to travel those same distances? Okay, and it's all related as well to C energy and understanding how C energy propagates faster than light as part of how, like these what we call a UFO or UAP. Per our science, we actually, if you see behind me, we refer to these vehicles as CTP craft by name because they're based on this science. And the way they work is their propulsion systems are calling in these additional C and T energy forces for them to be able to decode and modulate gravity, because it's not just a matter of physics. There are additional non-physical properties behind the existence of gravity, and for these craft to do what they do, whether it's to repulse gravity or whether it's to travel instantly to other star systems, this entire science applies to how the principles of CTP craft operate as well. So we're talking about from communicating with other civilizations eventually to within, I would say, depending on how fast we can muster support and rally funding behind our interests and achieving our objectives. Really, I know most of the science and the engineering required already. We could, realistically speaking, the CTP sciences can have humankind achieve interstellar travel by our standards within the next 10 to 15 years. Okay, because unlike Albuquerque Drive or NASA's Warp Drive and all these different theorists are working on, and they said, well, we still don't really know how to do it, and we're not sure how much we'd be able to generate so much energy. And, the whole, debate with that side of the conflict is that I have the understandings of this science today, now, for us to attain interstellar space travel within our life, within 1 generation or less. We know this now.
This is fascinating. And one question, the last question I would have to you is, how do you envision the future? So let us imagine the future where all of these things are happening. How do you envision your future with this?
Okay, well, number one, the time itself is not necessarily my priority to focus on, okay? Because it's like, for things to happen in our world, in our physical world, certain conditions need to exist for us to experience certain realities.
Mhm.
Okay, so like a good way to describe this. Let's say Drazen and CTP phase one were funded 20 years ago. Okay, if the world had been more accepting to our proposals, nearly 2 decades ago, we could very well already be traveling interstellar today, this year. If the world had been more open to receiving this science, we would have 20 years of progress behind us now. Instead, we've been delayed 20 years because of the nature of our proposals and the fact, Drazen and I, even in his passing, we want to independently research this science ourselves before we would turn out, any patent designs or other sharing that aspect of it. Okay. Um, if we had, let's say I had all the funding already and I had a UFO, let's say we had a UFO today. Okay. Is it useful to society today if we had these technologies in today's context, whether it was the communication systems or some of the other technology we have planned, or if we had, UFO tech today, would this be something we could all use now? And well, the part of the problem with this is that a lot of people, a lot of investors that I've met over the past 2 years, they all want the hardware, they all want the physical technologies now, but this isn't, we can't take this approach with this science or with CTP, because the issue is, humankind is a very warlike species. Okay, we're still very covetous, we're very materialistic, we're rather barbaric. I mean, look at the news headlines that are going across social media, every day with, mob violence, individual cases of violence happening across the United States, across Europe, across our world. Uh, we are not, our consciousness on this planet really is not at a point to truly appreciate what this science will ultimately, avail us within our lifetime, is possible. But we have a lot of growing just as a species to do before we can truly say, well, we deserve or can get to the point where we can utilize these technologies in a rather every day-to-day kind of setting. We have a lot of spiritual work, inner work to do on ourselves, our own consciousness, our own mind. And realizing these technologies really have to come after humankind collectively has really adjusted its way of thinking, and especially in terms of this science. We are in a transitioning era, okay? But I would still say that the era, humankind needs to transition like with us as we introduce these technologies into our world incrementally. So we're not like, just not say, hey, let's go take a trip to the pillars of creation in the deep universe today. Most people are not really ready to make that jump. So the introduction of CTP, we need to address both the cultural and the sociological implications of this science as we parallel like our innovation, schedule with everything as well. We can't just do one or the other. They all kind of have to simultaneously be part of the rollout of this science globally.
Mhm.
uh
Absolutely.
yeah,
Um,
so like I said, we can do this in the next many factors of that really depends on our human society today. My question would be, is your world, are you really ready to be part of this mission and empower CTP4 to let us start doing our research so we can start rolling this out for all of you? I mean, that's a real big part of it right there. Are we really ready to take that next step? And a big part of me, I'm the optimist, but the reality is we still have to address the negative social ramifications in our world. That there's still a lot of work to do, then that. So, but can we do it in our lifetime? Yes, that would be my goal.
what would be one advice you would give to the people to make them ready?
Well, I have, the startup, we've been having a lot of issues with traction. For revolutionary proposals like what we're carrying with us, there's a skeptic for every supporter. The best thing I would ask, if you find what our proposals to be are worth, look up our GoFundMe. We have a GoFundMe on GoFund. Look up the CTP Energy campaign. We've collected maybe 500-ish dollars to date for our startup. We're raising for some initial startup capitalization. Anything you could spare, would be a big help. I don't really need large denominations or thousands. Like, I don't need $1 billion today to build a UFO. I mean, yes, the aerospace, really, we're going to have to get serious investment capital or some type of other support for when it comes to like our aerospace division. We have life science division planned, and several, what we call subsidiaries that we'll need to address for different disruptive industries that we will bring CTP innovation into. Okay, but for now, our primary, our priority would be getting some startup capitalization towards our GoFundMe that I would be able to, get some working capital so I can invest that into some CTP websites and some other IT matters, so I could present more of this on our websites, really laying out the whole picture in a much better format than just trying to follow back or rewinding on YouTube. What did Reso say, like at 15 or 30 minutes. I will be able to explain more, with more empowerment towards our startup, and your support will help us kick off like the launch of the startup. And as we roll more information out, you'll find out more about how the like basics of the science works. And that would be, because the science itself will affect a lot of people that get in. So that's the answer to your question. But really, like, a lot of people get into meditation or things like transcendental meditation to work, on their thoughts or their consciousness. The first part of CTP is the consciousness, and that's your consciousness or anyone's. Okay, so we really need to start using this science and learning the basics and applying it really to our own consciousness and our thought processes before any of the physical technologies, and we could start getting to the point where we have physical research labs to start doing. We really need to start working on our consciousness, on ourselves first, and then the rest of the technology will come later. And I think the world is at a point where we're more open-minded, that we're ready to really take that next step. But we have to start in, there has to be internal steps and changes in ourselves for that the outer reality of this world will scale to our new level of thinking in the process. So these are all the steps required.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing the fascinating topics. How can we find you online if someone would like to contact you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am known as Reso or Reso Factor. Just look me up across the socials. I've got a link tree that takes you. There's all my Instagram, my Twitter, X. For professional correspondences, we have a CTP Energy corporate web page on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn via the corporate web page as well. I mean, everything, just look up Reso, you'll find me eventually.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions to this world, and I keep my fingers crossed for everything to happen within our lifetimes.
Yeah. Like I said, we're ready to go. Like we're just waiting on the rest of the world to catch up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Creative Bites. It's been a pleasure sharing these stories and insights with you. Remember, creativity is all around us, ready to be discovered, nurtured, and celebrated. I'm Ivona Fluda, and until next time, keep creating, keep exploring, and keep inspiring. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.